So guys, it's another week and we're back for some more Championship transfer rumours. Let's jump into this one. Guys, welcome back to another video on the channel. We've got quite a few interesting ones to talk over today, as well as some completed deals which have gone through in the past few days. As always, if you do go on to enjoy, make sure to leave a like. If we could hit 450 likes on today's video, that would be massively appreciated. As always, if you do see a transfer rumour that we didn't mention in today's video, get it in the comments down below. But without any further ado, let's start out by talking about some completed deals. And first up, we had Ashley Fletcher, who's completed a move to Watford on a free transfer after his contract had run out at Middlesbrough. Ashley Fletcher's been an interesting player while at Borough, and albeit probably a little bit frustrating, to be honest with you, because he was a player who you always thought had the potential to really kick on at Middlesbrough, but it never quite happened for him. Last season he missed the majority of it through injury, to be honest with you. The season before that there were times when him and Assombalonga looked like they were starting to form a bit of a partnership, but ultimately Middlesbrough fans never really got to see the best of that. So I'd imagine he'd be coming into this Watford squad as a bit of a squad player. Huddersfield have completed the signing of Oxford United fullback Josh Ruffles. I quite like this deal, to be honest with you. Obviously with Huddersfield and the way that their fullbacks play under Carlos Corberán, there's quite the emphasis on them to be getting up and down the pitch. Ruffles was doing that last season with Oxford, had a good goal return with 6 goals and 6 assists, and will be someone who will battle for that left back spot with Harry Toffolo. Motherwell midfielder Alan Campbell has completed a move over to Luton Town. He comes in as another option to bolster that midfield. The 23-year-old scored 4 goals for Motherwell last season. My side Preston then completed the deal for Stoke City defender Liam Lindsay. Obviously we had him on loan for the second half of this season, which has just gone by. Lindsay, I think he's done fairly well for North End, to be honest with you, since his arrival. Not 100% sure how a partnership between him and Bauer maybe worked, because I think they are probably quite similar players actually, but time will tell on that front. And yeah, it's a solid start to our transfer business. And the departing player from Preston North End is going to be Jayden Stockley, who's now finalised the move to Charlton. Obviously spent the second half of the season out on loan at Charlton in League One, where he did quite well, to be fair to him. You know, 8 goals scored in the second half of that season. There was also interest from quite a few other League One clubs. Sheffield Wednesday was one club who I saw mentioned towards the end, but Portsmouth especially. But Charlton probably was always going to be the most likely destination for Stockley to end up back there. So yeah, hopefully from a North End's point of view, this paves the way now for us to bring in another striker. And the next thing that I want to touch on before we get into any transfer rumours was West Brom's current situation, as they're still in search of a manager. We've got 3 weeks now until pre-season. They've still not appointed anyone, and their director of football has just left the club. I'm a bit all over the place with West Brom at the moment, I can't lie. And West Brom fans, I want to get your thoughts on everything that's going on at your club in the comments down below. At one point it looked absolutely nailed on that Chris Wilder would be getting the job. After that it looked nailed on at one point that David Wagner would be getting the job. Neither of those have ended up materialising for one reason or another. In terms of the bookmakers at the moment for who they're backing for the West Brom job at this point in time, Michael Appleton and Alex Neil are currently the front runners in terms of the bookies odds for that next managerial role for West Brom. So yeah, I don't think that anyone really understands what's going on at West Brom at the moment. When you're coming down from the Premier League especially, one thing you want to have about your club is a bit of stability, and for everyone to be sort of angling in the right direction and to know the plan going forward. At this point in time at West Brom, that couldn't be further from the truth. And speaking of managers, it also looks as if Scott Parker will be leaving Fulham this week, which also leaves them in a bit of a sticky situation in terms of planning for this upcoming season back down in the Championship. That would seemingly pave the way for him to then take over at Bournemouth, which would be quite an interesting blend actually. There's certainly an exciting group of players that he could be taking over from at Bournemouth to work with there, but it leaves Fulham in the situation where they need to get this next appointment spot on. But those were some of the things that I wanted to touch on before we get into any transfer rumours. Now without any further ado, let's hop into them. And so let's start out by talking about Brentford's Emiliano Marcondes, who has now been released by Brentford, and so understandably so. There's a lot of Championship interest in the player at the moment. I've seen QPR links, but the two seemingly front runners at this point in time are both Nottingham Forest and Barnsley. Barnsley, the most recent club to be linked to the attacking midfielder. I think he'd be a good option for quite a few Championship clubs actually. Marcondes has been a really interesting player from his time at Brentford. Across the last 2 seasons, the majority of his minutes have probably come off the bench as that sort of impact sub, but the performances which will stand in a lot of people's memories will be, you know, across the playoff campaign. He was brilliant in that second leg against Bournemouth and in the final as well, where he went on to score against Swansea. I think it's fair to say that the player can be pretty inconsistent at times, but that probably comes with not being sort of a nailed-on starter with that Brentford side. You know, a lot of minutes coming off the bench and stuff like that, but when he is on it, he's a very good player at this level. You can see why both Barnsley and Forest would be after another creative outlet as well, you know, looking at some of the players that Forest are going to be losing this summer in terms of the players that they've already released and players leaving on loan and stuff like that. And he certainly adds another dynamic to that Barnsley side going forward as well. So yeah, I'm really interested to see where Marcondes ends up, because if he does get sort of regular game time at a Championship club next season, I think he could be really exciting. Sticking with Barnsley, they also have an interest in Ipswich Town midfielder Flynn Downs. It looks like this deal isn't all too far away from being completed. The tenacious midfielder, only 22 years old, seemingly fits into Barnsley's model there and would certainly give them a bit more protection in that midfield. Averages 2.4 tackles, 1.4 interceptions and 1.5 fouls per 90, so he's very busy in that midfield. And with the way that Barnsley have definitely brought on some of their younger players in recent years, Downs looks to be another player that would fit into that sort of model. And another midfielder departing from Ipswich Town appears to be Andre Dazelle. We spoke about this rumour in last time's video, but this deal looks to be approaching closer and closer to a final deal with QPR now. Another fairly young midfielder, only 22, who QPR will look to bring on next season. QPR look to be doing a fairly nice job at the moment between balancing sort of experience and youth in their squad. And it also looks like Raheem Harper will be making a move from West Brom to Ipswich, going in as one of the replacements to the two midfielders that they're potentially losing. Harper's an interesting one. I thought that maybe he might get the chance to be in and around that squad next season, since they have West Brom drop back down to the Championship. His loan spell at Birmingham was a little bit mixed. I thought he started out fairly brightly, but just seemed to sort of fade as the season went on. But I thought he might get another move to a Championship club. I certainly think that in League One he'll be a top player there. My side, Preston North End, have been linked to now free agent Izzy Brown. Obviously, we've most recently seen him in the Championship for Sheffield Wednesday. Played for several clubs actually throughout the years in the Championship. He's had loads of loan spells out from Chelsea, but now the player finds himself as a free agent. It would be a bit of a gamble, this one, by North End, to be honest with you, and I'm not fully sold on this deal if it was to go through. I certainly think that there's other positions of the pitch that Preston need to prioritise before we go in for another number 10. You know, if we look at players who we've already got in that position, Alan Brown, Daniel Johnson, Brad Potts, Josh Harrop, so Izzy Brown would come in as potentially our like 5th number 10 if he was to join, obviously. I'm probably one of the few North End fans that still hold some hope out for Josh Harrop and him getting himself back into the squad, but even if you compare Josh Harrop to Izzy Brown's creative stats in the Championship over the last 3 or so seasons, both of them have sort of been in and out of the teams they've played for, and they're not really all too dissimilar, to be honest with you. On his day, Izzy Brown could be a very good player, but his injury record always makes this deal a bit of a gamble. Rotherham United fullback Matthew Sunday has been another player linked to North End, and this would be a deal which I would be very interested in. I think his contract is up soon, and by no means is he sort of like the finished article or anything like that. You know, he's still fairly raw considering his age, but this is a position that we're desperately in need of strengthening, and Sunday had a bit of versatility about him last season, whereby he played either as a fullback or a bit further up as a wingback. That would certainly suit us under McAvoy and how we've been sort of playing in that 3-5-2 system. Defensively is probably one of the areas where he still does need to sort of level up a little bit to really get up to like Championship standards and stuff like that, but I saw him have some good games for Rotherham last season, and as a sort of player that we can take on to develop and that's got sort of the natural attributes about him at the moment, I'd definitely be interested in this deal. And Swansea City have reportedly agreed a fee for PSV striker Joel Perreault. Now, since he's been promoted up to the first team, he's not played all too much football, with all of his league appearances this season for PSV coming off the bench, but he's going to be someone who Swansea are going to look to develop. You know, Steve Cooper's done that very well so far with a lot of Swansea's youngsters, and he's going to be one of those players coming to try and fill the void that's going to be left by Andre Ayew, who's departing this summer. If we think about it really, in Swansea in this season gone by have really for large parts of that season played without really a recognised number 9. You know, Jamal Lowe coming into this last season we saw as more of a winger. Well, he is someone who does play up front, but is not quite yet the finished article, I think it's fair to say. Understandably so, Rotherham are interested in bringing back Lewis Wing from Middlesbrough, who had a successful loan spell there out in the second half of last season, but Peterborough and Hull City are also said to be interested in the midfielder, and to be honest with you, I'd be pretty surprised if he was going to drop down level. I think that how well he did at Rotherham last season, he's shown that he can definitely offer something to a side. To be honest with you, I quite liked him, you know, when he was playing for Middlesbrough. It's just he was always a little bit too hit and miss, wasn't he? But in that Rotherham side, I thought he strung together a series of consistent performances and would definitely be a good option for either Hull or Peterborough. Middlesbrough have been one of the clubs linked to Derby County striker Lee Gregory. It's not exactly the most of sort of inspired links, you know, considering some of the strikers that Borough are losing. I know that they didn't always cut it, the likes of the Assombalongas and the Ashley Fletchers, but I think at this stage of his career, Lee Gregory is more seen as a bit more like of a backup man, opposed to that starter that he was for Millwall a few years ago. Sheffield United goalkeeper Aaron Ramsdale has been linked to a few Premier League clubs, with both Spurs and Wolves being mentioned in conversations with the goalkeeper. Ramsdale, by the way, just been called back up to the England squad due to the Dean Henderson injury, but yeah, I can't help but think that another full season for Ramsdale, this time maybe in the Championship with Sheffield United, would do him the world of good. I think we saw an obvious improvement in his performances from his time at United in that second half of the season after having a bit of a shaky start there. From Sheffield United's point of view, I'm sure that they want to keep hold of the player, but if the money was right and they were able to make profit off the player, they may be tempted to sell. One transfer rumour that got me very interested is Norwich being linked to Bournemouth midfielder Philip Billing. Now, when it comes to Bournemouth, we could see a few sales from them this summer in terms of their more saleable assets. Philip Billing, considering the second half of the season that he's just had, definitely would be one of those more saleable assets, and the move to Norwich would be quite an interesting one. The first half of the season, and for some time, I didn't really get Philip Billing until he was moved into that attacking role and he was given a little bit more licence to go forward and things like that. That's when we saw the best of him. I think that that's the best position to go ahead and utilise him in, you know. He's a little bit unorthodox because he's like 6'5" or something like that playing in that position. You know, normally we associate number 10s with being like quite small and nimble and stuff like that, but Billing put together a string of brilliant performances towards the end of that season, really when Jonathan Woodgate came in and pushed him into that number 10 role. 8 goals, 4 assists for him. He'd be a decent option for Norwich, I think. I wouldn't rule that one out. Wolves' Dion Sanderson is certainly a player who is in demand at the moment. He's quite versatile in the positions he can play anywhere across that back line, to be honest with you. We saw him a couple of seasons ago out on loan at Cardiff in the Championship. He's most recently been playing his football for Sunderland, and Wolves reportedly willing to let the player go, this time on a permanent basis. The clubs that have been mentioned so far, potentially a return to Sunderland, Huddersfield have been mentioned, then the likes of Stoke, Sheffield United, Birmingham, Newcastle and Crystal Palace. From his time at Cardiff especially, I remember he had one really good game against North End, which is stuck in the back of my mind. Nottingham Forest striker Lyle Taylor is attracting interest from a few Championship clubs at the moment, with Middlesbrough and most recently Stoke interested in the forward. It'll be interesting so from a Forest perspective if they're willing to sort of cut ties with the player after not exactly the most successful first seasons at the club. Not all of that is his fault, don't get me wrong, but considering how well he'd done at Charlton the season before and fairly limited game time, I think the expectations for Taylor were to come in and really, you know, go on and push Lewis Grabban. But none of that really happened for Forest last season, did it? Huddersfield Town's Pippa has been linked to Sporting Lisbon. Now, the most bizarre thing about this story is the figures being talked about are ridiculously cheap at the moment. I've seen like €2 million being quoted and stuff like that, but Huddersfield would be crazy to sell him anywhere around that figure after the season he's just had. I think he fits into their system really quite well, actually. He carries the ball very well, gets up into the final third and can be that overlapping option on that right hand side. Obviously Huddersfield have recently brought in another right back in Ollie Turton, but Huddersfield fans will be hoping that he's not coming to be Pippa's replacement and that he's there to just go ahead and push him if anything. Former Huddersfield defender Matthias Jorgensen has been linked with a move to Birmingham. I also saw Preston being mentioned in the conversation, but for the life of me, I couldn't see him ending up at North End. Birmingham, though, may be a little bit more of a likely destination for the player. Matt Ritchie has been linked with a move back to Bournemouth. If anything, it seems like the player is the one that's angling for this move at the moment, so it'll be interesting to see if Bournemouth do actually go ahead and pursue it. But there we have it, guys. That will wrap it up for today's video. As always, if you did go in to enjoy, make sure to leave a like. Get all your thoughts on all the recent speculation which is going on in the Championship in the comments down below. Do leave a like if you want to enjoy, and do stick around and subscribe for a bit of regular Championship content. But other than that, thanks for watching, and I'll see you all in the next one.